Good evening. I'm going to bring you the life of a very wonderful saint. We need a saint like this now in our church because there's troubles all over, but particularly at the moment it's really quite corrupt with hierarchies in the Catholic Church in America. It's very public, and we need a saint like this one. It's happened before in the church. It happened at the time of His Eminence Saint Charles Borromeo, Cardinal Archbishop of Milan. This version is going to be quite long, but following that I will do a brief one for those who only want the outline. But this one gives absolutely everything about his life from birth till the very end, and it is very, very interesting. Charles Borromeo, Italian; Carlo Borromeo, Latin; Carolus Borromeus, 2nd of October 1538 to 3rd of November 1584, was the Archbishop of Milan from 1564 to 1584 and a Cardinal of the Catholic Church. He was a leading figure of the Counter-Reformation combat against the Protestant Reformation, together with St. Ignatius of Loyola and St. Philip Neri. In that role, he was responsible for significant reforms in the Catholic Church, including the founding of seminaries for the education of priests. He is honoured as a saint by the Catholic Church with a feast day on 4th of November, which was recent, which reminded me about him. This, but I'm going to read the contents. I'll go through them very quickly, the contents, and then read the matters about him. His early life was the Rome period, Archbishop of Milan; influence on English affairs; persecution of religious dissidents; controversy in last days and veneration. Carlo Borromeo was painted by Giovanni Figini, and it's a beautiful painting, oil on canvas, 41 by 48, Biblioteca Ambrosiana. Native name, Count Carlo, so he was nobility, from Borromeo di Arona, Archdiocese Milan, see Milan, appointed 12th of May 1564. His term ended 3rd of November 1584. His predecessor was Giovanni Angelo de Medici, they're well-known famous family. Successor Gaspari Visconti. Other posts: Cardinal Priest of Santa Prassede and Orders and Ordination, 4th of September 1563 by Giovanni Serbelloni, created 31st of January 1560, made cardinal by Pius V. His rank was a cardinal priest. He was made a cardinal before he became a priest, but he was highly educated, and his uncle was Pope. He was born 2nd of October 1538, Castle of Arona, Duchy of Milan. He died 13th of November 1584. He was only aged 46, and he did so much in his life, it's incredible. He was buried in Milan Cathedral. His denomination is Roman Catholic. His parents, the father was Gilberto Borromeo, 7th Count of Arona, and his mother was Margherita de Medici di Marignano. Previous administrator of the post, Milan 1560 to 1564. Cardinal Deacon of Santi Silvestro e Martino e Monti 1560 to 1563. Cardinal Priest of Santi Silvestro e Martino e Monti 1563 to 1564. Felice Tirano Urbano, date 7th of December 1563. The Cardinalate, elevated by Pius IV, the date was the 31st of January 1560. Episcopal succession. Bishops consecrated by Charles Borromeo as principal consecrator: Mark Sittich von Hohenems, 1564, Nicola Espondrati, 1564. Later he became Gregory XIV. Gabriele Palotti, 10th of February 1566. Alessandro Maria Sauli, born 12th of March. Galeazzo Moroni, 1573. Giovanni Francesco Bonamigni, 1573. Paolo del Grasso, 1574. Lodovico Michelio, 24th of June 1584. Ottaviano Paravicini, 15th of July 1584. Charles was a descendant of nobility. The Borromeo family was one of the most ancient and wealthy in Lombardy, made famous by several notable men, both in the church and the state. The family coat of arms included the Borromeo rings, which are sometimes taken to symbolize the Holy Trinity. Charles's father Gilbert was Count of Arona. His mother Margaret was a member of the Milan branch of the House of Medici. The third son in a family of 6 children, he was born in the castle of Arona on Lake Maggiore, 36 miles from Milan, on 2nd of October 1538. Borromeo received the tonsure when he was about 12 years old. At this time, his paternal uncle Giulio Cesarea Borromeo turned him over to him the income from the rich Benedictine Abbey of Saints Gratinian and Felin, one of the ancient perquisites of the family. Charles made plain to his father that all revenues from the abbey, beyond what was required to prepare him for a career in the church, belonged to the poor and could not be applied to secular use. The young man attended the University of Pavia, where he applied himself to the study of civil and canon law. Due to a slight impediment of a speech, he was regarded as slow, but his thoroughness and industry meant that he made rapid progress. In 1554, his father died, and although he had an elder brother, Count Federico, he was requested by his family to take the management of their domestic affairs. After a time he resumed his studies, and on the 6th of December 1559 he earned a doctorate in canon and civil law. Now is the Rome period. On the 25th of December 1559, Borromeo's uncle, Cardinal Giovanni Angelo Medici, was elected as Pope Pius IV. The newly elected Pope required his nephew to come to Rome, and on the 13th of January 1560 appointed him Protonotary Apostolic. Shortly thereafter, on 31st of January 1560, the Pope created him Cardinal, and thus Charles, as Cardinal nephew, was entrusted with both the public and privy seal of the ecclesiastical state. He was also brought into the government of the Papal States and appointed as supervisor of the Franciscans, Carmelites, and Knights of Malta. During his 4 years in Rome, Borromeo lived in austerity, obliged the Roman Curia to wear black, and established an academy of learned persons, the Academy of the Vatican Knights, publishing their memoirs as the Noctes Vaticanae. Charles organized the third and last session of the Council of Trent in 1562-63. He had a large share in the making of the Tridentine Catechism, Catechismus Romanus. In 1561, Borromeo founded and endowed a college at Pavia, today known as Almo Collegio Borromeo, which he dedicated to Saint Justina of Padua. On 19th of November 1562, his older brother Federica suddenly died. His family urged Charles to seek permission to return to the lay state, laicization, that's what it said, to marry and have children, so that the family name would not become extinct. But he decided not to leave the ecclesiastic estate. His brother's death, along with his contacts with the Jesuits and the Theatines, and the example of bishops such as Bartholomew of Braga, were the causes of a conversion of Charles towards a more strict and operative Christian life, and his aim became to put into practice the dignity and duties of the bishop as drafted by the recent Council of Trent. Archbishop of Milan, Charles was appointed an administrator of the Archdiocese of Milan on 17th of February 1560. After his decision to put into practice the role of bishop, he decided to be ordained priest. 4th of September 1563, and on the 7th of December 1563 he was consecrated bishop in the Sistine Chapel by Cardinal Giovanni Serbelloni. Charles was formally appointed Archbishop of Milan on 15th of May 1564, after the former Archbishop Ippolito II d'Este waived his claims on that I've lost archbishopric, but he was only allowed by the Pope to leave Rome 1 year later. Charles made his formal entry into Milan as Archbishop on 23rd of September 1565. Reform in Milan. After the death of his uncle Pius IV in 1566, Charles contributed materially to suppressing the cabals of the conclave. Before Charles went to Milan, while he was overseeing reform in Rome, a nobleman remarked that the latter city was no longer a place to enjoy oneself or to make a fortune. Carlo Borromeo has undertaken to remake the city from top to bottom, he said, predicting that the reformer's enthusiasm would lead him to correct the rest of the world once he had finished with Rome. Subsequently, he devoted himself to the reformation of his diocese, which had deteriorated in practice owing to the 80-year absence of his previous archbishops. Milan was the largest archdiocese in Italy at the time, with more than 3,000 clergy and 800,000 people. Both its clergy and laity had drifted from church teaching. The selling of indulgences and ecclesiastical positions was prevalent. Monasteries were full of disorder. Many religious were lazy, ignorant, and debauched. Charles made numerous pastoral visits and restored dignity to divine service. He urged churches to be designed in conformity with the decrees of the Council of Trent, which stated, that sacred art and architecture, lacking adequate scriptural foundation, was in effect prohibited, as was any inclusion of classical pagan elements in religious art. He divided the nave of the church into two compartments to separate the sexes at worship. He extended his reforms to the collegiate churches, monasteries, and even to the confraternities of penitents, particularly that of St. John the Baptist. This group was to attend to prisoners and those condemned to death, to give them help and support. Charles believed that abuses in the church arose from ignorant clergy. Among his most important actions, he established seminaries, colleges, and communities for the education of candidates for holy orders. His emphasis on Catholic learning greatly increased the preparation of men for the priesthood and benefited their congregations. In addition, he founded the Fraternity of Oblates of St. Ambrose, a society of secular men who did not take orders but devoted themselves to the church and followed a discipline of monastic prayers and study. They provided assistance to parishes where ordered by the church. The new archbishop's efforts for catechesis and the instruction of youth included the initiation of the first Sunday school classes and the work of the confraternity Christian doctrine. Borromeo diocesan reforms faced opposition from several religious orders, particularly that of the Humiliati, Brothers of Humility, a penitential order which, although reduced to about 170 members, they owned some 90 monasteries. Some members of that society formed a conspiracy against his life, and a shot was fired at him in the Archbishop's chapel. His survival was considered miraculous. In 1576, there was a famine in Milan due to crop failures, and later an outbreak of the plague. The city's trade fell off, and along with it the people's source of income. The governor and many members of the nobility fled the city, but the bishop remained to organize the care of those affected and to minister to the dying. He called together the superiors of all the religious communities in the diocese and won their cooperation. Borromeo tried to feed 60,000 to 70,000 people daily. He used up his own funds and went into debt to provide food for the hungry. Finally, he wrote to the governor and successfully persuaded him to return. Influence on English affairs. Charles had also been involved in English affairs when he assisted Pius IV. Many English Catholics had fled to Italy at this time because of the persecutions under Queen Elizabeth I. He gave pastoral attention to English Catholics who fled to Italy to escape the new laws against the Catholic faith. St. Edmund Campion, a Jesuit, along with St. Ralph Sherwin, visited him at Milan in 1580 on their way to England. They stayed with him for 8 days, talking with him every night after dinner. A Welshman, Griffith Roberts, served as his canon theologian, and an Englishman, Thomas Goldwell, as, excuse me, it's hard to turn this over, Vicar General. The Archbishop carried on his person a small picture of John Fisher, who with Thomas More had been executed during the reign of Henry VIII, and for whom he held a great veneration. During the 19th century, Catholic restoration in England, Cardinal Wiseman was to institute an order of Oblates of St. Charles, led by Henry Edward Manning, as a congregation of secular priests, directly supporting the Archbishop of Westminster. Persecution of religious dissidents. Though the Diet of Elans of 1524 and 1526 had proclaimed freedom of worship in the public of the three leagues, Charles repressed Protestantism in the Swiss valleys. The Catholic Encyclopedia relates, in November 1583, he began a visitation as apostolic visitor of all the cantons of Switzerland and the Grisons, leaving the affairs of his diocese in the hands of Monsignor Owen Lewis, his Vicar General. He began in the Messalina Valley. Here not only was there heresy to be fought, but also witchcraft and sorcery, and at Roverdu it was discovered that the provost, or rector, was the foremost in sorceries. During his pastoral visit to the region, 150 people were arrested for practicing witchcraft. 11 women and the provost were condemned to be burned alive. Reacting to the pressure of the Protestant Reformation, Borromeo encouraged Ludwig Pfeiffer in his development of the Golden League, but did not live to see its formation in 1580. Based in Lucerne, the organization, also called the Borromean League, linked activities of several Swiss Catholic cantons of Switzerland, which became the center of Catholic counter-Reformation efforts. This organization was determined to expel heretics and burn some people at the stake. It created severe strains in the civil administration of the Confederation and caused the breakup of Appenzell Canton along religious lines. Controversy and last days. Borromeo was described by a biographer and as an austere, dedicated, humorless, and uncompromising personality. Charged with implementing the reforms dictated by the Council of Trent, his uncompromising stance brought him into conflict with secular leaders, priests, and even the Pope. He met with much opposition to his reforms. The governor of the province and many of the senators addressed complaints to the courts of Rome and Madrid. In 1584, during his annual retreat at Monte Varallo, he fell ill with intermittent fever and ague, and on returning to Milan grew rapidly worse. After receiving the last sacraments, he died quietly on 4th of November at the age of 46. Wonder if they poisoned him. I'm saying that, I'm not reading that. I mean, it's funny how he got ill. He had so many enemies. Veneration. Following his death, popular devotion to Charles arose quickly and continued to grow. The Milanese celebrated his anniversary as though he were already a saint, and supporters in a number of cities collected documentation to support his canonization. In 1602, Clement VIII beatified Charles. In 1604, his case was sent to the Congregation of Rites. On the 1st of November 1610, Paul V canonized Charles. 3 years later, the Church added his feast to the general Roman calendar for celebration on 4th of November, along with Guarinus of Palestrina and perhaps Anselm of Lucca. He is one of only 2 or 3 cardinal nephews to have been canonized. Charles Borromeo is the patron saint of bishops, catechists, and seminarians. The iconography. Borromeo's emblem is the Latin word humilitas, humility, which is a portion of the Borromeo shield. He is usually represented in art in his robes, barefoot, carrying the cross as archbishop, a rope around his neck, one hand raised in blessing, thus recalling his work during the plague. The sources. Charles' biography was originally written by 3 of his contemporaries, Agostino Valerio, afterwards Cardinal and Bishop of Verona, and Carlo Bascapi, General of the Barnabites, afterwards Bishop of Novara, who wrote their contributions in Latin, and Pietro Gusano, a priest, who wrote his in Italian. Father Gusano's account was the most detailed of the 3. The legacy of Charles Borromeo's correspondence shows his influential position in Europe during his lifetime. The popes under whom he served sought his advice. The Catholic sovereigns of Europe, Henry III of France, Philip II of Spain, Mary Queen of Scots, and others showed how they valued his influence. Cardinal Valero of Verona said of him that Borromeo was to the well-born a pattern of virtue, to his brother cardinals an example of true nobility. Cardinal Baronius styled him a second Ambrose, whose early death, lamented by all good men, inflicted great loss on the Church. Late in the 16th or at the beginning of the 17th century, Catholics in England circulated among themselves a life of St. Charles. Well, I think he was a very holy and devout man, don't you? I will read the short summary on a separate video. It will be only very brief, outlining in a very neat way, but I like the longer version. Okay, God bless. I've got other readings to do now.